What is up? It is the Figure Hunter, and today we're going to do the heart rate accuracy review for the new Coros Nomad. The watch came out a little bit ago, and finally doing some testing for it, and going to do the final review for the Coros Nomad coming up in a few days, but wanted to do an in-depth review for the heart rate accuracy when doing higher intensity workouts and dynamic weightlifting. If you're new to the channel, that's the kind of thing I do. I test for those types of things, but I also look for devices that track for your intensity of your training load, or your training load tracking over time, as well as your wellness and recovery to have the readiness to go do the next hard training workout. So the Coros Nomad came out. What we're going to look at is we're going to look at the new sensor relative to the previous predecessor sensors. Then we're just going to look at simple charts. All these charts were only because of DC Rainmaker. If you've ever followed his channel, I'll put a link in the description below. He has an actual analyzer that you can subscribe to put in data from different devices, and it'll compare it, it'll GPS tracks, it'll do all sorts of things. I just use it for comparing the heart rate accuracy of a device to an ECG chest strap, typically the Polar H10, but the DC Rainmaker, Ray is his name. He is awesome as a reviewer, does straight to the point, holistic, hardcore reviews. Check it out. But let's look at first the heart rate sensor, then the charts. First the zone 2 type workout, then dynamic weightlifting, typically like Olympic lifting, but coupled with some static lifting like deadlifts and strict press and bench press, and then some CrossFit workout. And then we'll look at all the heart rate data to see how it compares to a chest strap. One beat versus another beat of all the workouts combined. How does it look on a chart, and look at the correlation compared to some others. So looking at the new sensor on the Coros Nomad, this is the Nomad. I totally dig the design. The layout is very Instinct-esque or Casio G-Shock. But this is the new sensor, and it looks very similar to sensors of the past. So this is the Pace Pro, which is their AMOLED version. Very similar, just looks like a little bit bigger diodes. And then this is their Apex 2 Pro. Looks like smaller diodes. And then see if I can, my hands are capable of holding all of these at the same time. It looks like, oh my gosh, that's pathetic. Yeah, it looks like Pacer, the Apex 2 Pro as well as the Pace Pro look the same. And so the Nomad's got a little bit newer sensor design to it. So we're gonna see how it holds up. First, we're gonna look at how it held up in just a monostructural. Now, monostructural for me is typically ski ergs and rowing and assault bike, but low level heart rate, let's take a look. All right, so looking at the monostructural workout, it actually holds up pretty well across space and time. Not bad at all, and it had a little bobble in the beginning, but it looks like it's trustworthy from a monostructural standpoint. Monostructural workouts just tend to be like smooth, steady state. This is my zone 2, so I'm staying in like the 125 to 135 heart rate zone, but spot on. And this sort of basically tells us in general terms, it's probably gonna do fine. We'll see it in some other workouts. Okay, so now we're gonna look at some dynamic weightlifting. Not all these were Olympic lifts, but some of them were sprinkled in, but an optical heart rate sensor on the wrist when doing bench press, strict press, headstand push-ups, deadlifts, pull-ups, weighted pull-ups, it's hard to keep up with. So this is the first workout. You can see it got kind of off in a lot of places. The purple is the chest strap. You can see it didn't pick up really any of those really big peaks. Those were like super heavy back squats. And then in the back half, it did, as my heart rate was higher, it did catch up with the heart rate overall and stay up there because my heart rate stayed up there. But you can see in the beginning with the dynamic lifts or my heart rate spiking and then falling, it didn't hold up super well. Here's a workout lifting where it just didn't catch a lot of the peaks. It missed. So when it comes to weightlifting, I mean, it's kind of following the gyration, but in general, it's not getting, like if you're looking at training load, you want to have all the peaks as much captured as possible. And I just did a review for the Race 2, the Suunto Race 2, and it caught a lot of the peaks of the lifting, so it's possible. This one just did not. So in general, I would say it's not trustworthy for hard weightlifting. It's just not gonna keep up. Okay, so the next workouts, we're gonna look at CrossFit. And CrossFit includes sometimes some lifting in the beginning with an intense portion of a workout, and then oftentimes I will follow up with some just sit on an assault bike and flush my muscles out for 15 minutes after class. So we'll see how it does with that. Now, looking at the first workout, it does have some lifting in the beginning. Unfortunately, we see again, it didn't keep up with the lifting, did not have the ability to do it. It did okay in this particular intense portion. These were, higher heart rates in the 160 to 180. And it did okay. The fact that it got up there is good, but it didn't actually give us the data we wanted. And then in the back half with that monostructural flushing of the system, it did great. So again, it's proving to be trustworthy in monostructural. In this CrossFit workout, there was some lifting in the beginning. It didn't catch any of those peaks. That's a fail. And then in the intense portion, it didn't catch any of that intense portion. And then it proved successful again with the monostructural on the back half as I was flushing my muscles. And then in this workout, this was a brutal workout. This was the 9/11 workout. And it did great in the beginning. It's like it looked like it was going to be like the sensor we've always wanted it to be, and then it fell off and it just never caught up. So a fail again. And in general, I just, the reality is it's only appearing to be effective in monostructural workouts. It's only appearing to really do that of any decency. Okay, so now we're gonna look at the plot graphs, and it just takes all the data of all the workouts that I did, and it puts it all in one graph, and it plots 1 point from the chest strap to 1 point on the sensor on the watch itself, on the Coros Nomad. And so you'll see where it falls. If everything was lined up, it'd be a perfect diagonal line. Every 75th heartbeat here is 75 heart rate there, 175, 175. And so here's the correlation graph. And, when you look at this, it's not accurate. 0.65 is very much on the lower end of things. I only did it across 7 workouts because that was all I needed to be able to see that it wasn't be trustworthy for using for your data to be accurate on the training load tracking. Even if you compare it and you see it's like, in most of those situations, it's too low relative to where the chest strap was, but the accuracy is off. If you were to compare it to the Pace 3, the Pace 3 was actually more accurate for me. I can't remember how many workouts I did to test this. This is in general a fail because usually in this lower level, when you have this much hair, this much across the board on both sides, to me is not something you would want to trust. If you compare it to other heart rate sensors, this was the Polar Vantage V3, which is one of the newest devices from Polar. It was very poor as well. Sorry that, I don't know if they have algorithm shifts since then. This was the Soonto Race 2. It actually performed really well on the lifting and on the CrossFit for the most part. So it has a 0.89, which is in that realm of relatively trustworthy if you had to rely on it, although I wouldn't rely on an optical heart rate sensor. Here it is. There's the Balance 2. The Balance 2 stood out pretty well, although it overshot a lot of the workouts. But in general, that's still a good score. And then, sort of like an industry leader would be like Garmin. The Apple Watch is probably what is the best industry leader, but you can see the density just gets a lot better. Obviously, in looking at all these things, we can just see that the Nomad, it could be the best watch on the planet Earth. And we're going to talk about what I liked and what I am liking and what I don't like about the Nomad, about the Coros platform and the app. But the heart rate sensor is not reliable for doing any dynamic workouts, any type of boot camp, Orange Theory, F45, anything where you are picking up a dumbbell or doing anything across the wrist, any kind of real wrist flex, or even I would say real heart rate intensity. You really shouldn't rely on the optical heart rate sensor on the Coros Nomad. You should connect to an external sensor. Orange Theory has it built into their program. You have to buy an armband to participate. So it's something like that. Monostructural, even monostructural where I was doing rowing and assault bike and ski erg. So like all arm-ish monostructural at a lower Zone 2 cardio, it held up fine. So Zone 2 workouts, I would think for running workouts, maybe for indoor cycling it'd be okay. But otherwise, it's not okay for anything else. That's the full review for the Coros Nomad heart rate sensor when doing higher intensity interval or more dynamic weightlifting. It's the Fit Gear Hunter. Thanks so much for watching.